Most people do not know that kind of world, to live in that kind of world, even visit that kind of world. And we would get to his place and close the door, and I wouldn't leave until we were done filming 6 or 7 hours later. I would sit in that room, I didn't want to be anywhere else.
If this is your first time listening, welcome. This is episode 006 of the Doc This 24 in 12 series, where we are interviewing 24 amazing artists, influencers, and filmmakers in 12 months. Today I have Josh Lanier, a Toronto-based filmmaker with an inclination for finding unique subjects to profile. His most recent, a drug-addicted street artist surviving the grind with his art, by the name of Ken Foster. If you ever wanted to learn what it takes to profile the homeless, deal truth with tough subjects, or find a home for a homeless film, this is your episode. To kind of learn a little bit more about you, do you have 2 or 3 or 4 highlights, key points, or if you were to summarize yourself and your work history a little bit, some of the things that you've done in your time in this work?
Right on. Fair enough. Completely unschooled, except for I kind of got thrown into a world where I was starting to do editing, so a lot of behind the scenes kind of stuff. And I really got into editing, so I decided to take a crash course. And I took this 3-day crash course to get certified on Final Cut by Apple. It was like an Apple certification. And so I was convinced that was going to get me work in big time, film and television. And in honesty, it did really nothing other than give me a piece of paper that said I was certified by Final Cut, or by Apple on Final Cut Pro. I've always wanted to make documentary films. And when my wife and I moved to Vancouver about 8 years ago, I just kind of decided to reinvent myself, since no one really knew me here, that I could say I'm a director. And looking for projects, I prefer documentaries. And the next thing I knew, something kind of fell into my lap, and I successfully made a interesting little documentary, and that inspired me to go out and actually find people to make my next one, and then the next one after that. And so, yeah, it's just kind of been a snowball since I've decided to reinvent myself.
Reinventing yourself, that is so powerful. That is so spot on.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see any other way for it to happen, because I didn't have the credentials, I didn't have the resume, I didn't have the COV,
I feel like, in some ways our field's unique in that you can't really reinvent yourself to be a doctor or a lawyer, but if you work hard and you dig in, this field as an artist, this field kind of allows it. I love that.
Right. And luckily I had the luxury. My wife is the breadwinner in the family. So she's always been so supportive of me creatively that I had the opportunity to really kind of just focus on what I wanted to do. And that's been the biggest blessing for me.
So how do you come across this story?
Well, it's like anyone that has ever met Ken Foster. You're in the Gastown area, which is a very impoverished section of town here in Vancouver, and it's filled with tons of hipster bars and restaurants. And he lives in the area, and he survives by going out on the streets and selling his paintings. So if you've ever met him, it's because you bought a painting from him at some point, most likely. And I met him our first painting we bought was 2009, I believe. Maybe 2010. So we had met him once before, and then it was maybe a year later and met him again, and I was in between projects, and my wife and I were just talking about it. She said, he's got to have an amazing story. The light bulb went off, and the next thing I knew, I was calling friends and saying, guess what, we're going to go film.
How do you do that? How do you take the next step and build that relationship?
Right. That was the trickiest part of the entire thing, because he didn't really know us from anyone else. We got extremely lucky with the first day we were heading out. When I say we, it was my partner, Taylor Milne. He's kind of my assistant director and gopher. He does a little bit of everything. But it was just he and I, because I wanted to keep it really low key, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. So we were on our way to kind of the area we knew where he lived, but not positively, and ran into someone who was a major collector of his work, who basically walked us right to his door. And next thing we knew, we were, standing with Ken Foster, and film was rolling.
What are some of the challenges and fears and things that you had to overcome on a personal level to kind of build this?
Most people do not know that kind of world, to live in that kind of world, even visit that kind of world, because he lives in a government-funded crack house, basically, where it's a old rundown kind of hotel, and He has a room with barely room enough for a bed and a bookshelf, and that's about it. His place was absolutely filled to the brims with trash, and I hated going there. The building gave me the creeps. Everyone there always gives you the evil eye as you're coming in. And I never felt 100% safe there. And we would get to his place and close the door, and I wouldn't leave until we were done filming 6 or 7 hours later. I would sit in that room. I didn't want to be anywhere else. I didn't like being in the room, but once we were in there, I didn't want to wander. I didn't want to it was just because every time the camera was rolling, as awkward and uncomfortable feeling as it was, I knew what I was capturing was amazing.
I think about you in that space, like on an applicable level, like you're doing these things late at night, you're coming home. I mean, how do you keep your mind in a space and yet allow him to feel safe?
It was very tricky. I mean, we created quite a relationship with one another, and I think you can feel it during the film because we have very intimate moments where we're talking with each other very candidly. But I mean, I really do consider him like another brother, and there were times where I would leave his place and I would break down and cry because it's just so there's nothing that you could do for him, and I just thought, God, I wish I could do something for him, and that's tough to kind of turn that off, and then. Because I didn't want to show up every day to his place, be filming and be a bummer to him. So I just needed to let him do his thing. And, anytime he ever asked for any help or said he wanted to do something to better this part of his life, I was always there to try and help him. But you can't force him to do anything.
When you get in the editing room and you're kind of in that space and you're working it over and you're working it over and you're working it over, were there times where you were in conflict with things that you were attached to, and maybe you didn't want to show that side of him, but you knew, were there times where you were in conflict there, and how did you deal with those conflicts?
There were definitely conflicting things because I knew that there were things that Ken just doesn't like hearing said about himself. And the first one is that he's schizophrenic. The second one is that he's a drug addict. So I kind of had to make, amends with myself pretty early on to know that I was going to be making a film that he was not going to be happy with, just based on those two things. And at one point before I was done with the editing, I showed him about the first 5 minutes of my rough sketch. And he was like, yeah, I don't like it. Take my mom out. And I had to have the talk with him. I'll listen to anything that he has to say about the film, but he doesn't get the final decision on edits, and that I wasn't saying anything untrue, that all I was doing was showing the stuff that we filmed together, and I didn't stitch words together. I didn't make anything up. It was just what we filmed while we were together. And he seemed to be okay with that, but I decided I wasn't going to show him anything else until it was done.
How did he respond to that conversation? Did he kind of rebel and just take off, or how did that?
No. He's a very smart guy, and he understands rationally that I wasn't trying to be mean to him. So I think, again, just the time we took to build the relationship, he knew that it wasn't me being malicious or being a jerk or just saying it to make him feel bad. I honestly, he's seen the film since and he loves it. His comment is always great. He says it's interesting to see what someone else would do with a year of your life. But he wasn't mad. I remember that, he was mad at first and we had the conversation and then he was cool.
And you didn't have any fears about that, or fears that he might run? I mean, was there any time when where you felt like your honesty could compromise the film going forward, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There was a lot. I mean, I got braver as time went on. I think it's some of the more interesting conversations in the film because at first I was definitely kind of dancing around the whole conversation of drug addiction and mental illness. And I was definitely worried about him getting very angry with me. And honestly, I couldn't even imagine what would have happened. But there were several nights, one in particular, that I just laid into him about being a drug addict. And, tell me what it's all about. And I remember leaving that night. A lot of that's actually in the movie. And I remember leaving that night and Taylor saying to me, the next time we film, you got to be easier on him. I was like, holy shit, I didn't realize that I was being that intense with him. But he stood in there and he took all the punches and again, like I said, it's some of the, I think it's some of the better footage in the film.
How are things going with the film now? You've released it. You're having some success.
Yeah, I mean, it's not technically released. We've just been doing some film festivals, and really the reason we do the film festivals is to try and get sales agents and distributors eyeballs on it, so other people, so more people can see the film than just film festival attendees.
I mean, when it comes to festivals, on a little bit different topic, I know tons of people, including myself, that have felt like, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to tackle this. Do you have any input on kind of how did you go about it, and what are your thoughts on the whole on the process?
Yeah, I love and hate film festivals, but honestly, my first film, I obtained a bunch of footage. I made this 55-minute documentary, and I thought, okay, I'm going to start submitting it, and I had never heard of Without a Box before, but discovered Without a Box, which is a service that helps you submit your film to film festivals, and I just went for it. If you're a documentary-focused film festival, I started sending it out, and I got a couple of film festivals to show the film, and all of a sudden I was like, wow, that actually worked. It didn't get me any interest in terms of distribution or sales agents or anything like that, but I don't know if I would have been ready for that at that point because it was so indie, but it emboldened me to think that I could at least make my second film, and I knew now that I could go to film festivals and, I don't know, just sheer determination, honestly.
With the festivals, you mean just sticking with it?
I had no clue at all. I mean, I remember looking at some articles just about, what are the top 10 festivals, and that was about it. So, yeah, I got very lucky that I had a couple people that wanted to show my first film, and then, like I said, it just kind of emboldened me and made me feel like, okay, I can do this. Let's try it on a bigger level.
Have you gone for like the biggest festivals? Does that kind of have been your goal, or did you pick out specific festivals you felt that would kind of fall into the genre of film you have? How did you tackle that?
Well, I've always made a point to submit to the Toronto International Film Festival and the Vancouver International Film Festival. Those are basically the two biggest in my area. So I've always submitted to those. I have yet to have anything accepted by them, but it's just one of those things that those are the ones I feel I need to submit to. And then after that, I really do look for documentary-focused festivals, art house kind of focused festivals. My last film was about cosplayers, so we looked into a lot of like sci-fi and fan-based genre stuff.
Just in general to your work, favorite part of production. What's your favorite part in the production world?
I love using the camera. I love filming. I love the cinematography aspect of things. It's something I've never been trained in at all, but I love doing photography and camera work. Any
reason behind that? Anything that you can tangibly explain?
I had a really crappy VHS camera when I was like 10 years old and made silly art house, short story films. And I guess that's where it began because I can't think of anything else. But yeah, I just loved having a camera in my hand.
What would you say is, and can be, a stumper, but would you say is the hardest thing you've had to do in documentary film work?
Hardest thing? That is an interesting question. I mean, I would say it's just the hours to build relationships. It's that's tough to say. I mean, because it was, I can't tell you the amount. I mean, it's 18 or so months, but it's just, there were some days where we were 12 hours, 15 hours with him. And it felt like a grind every day. But I have to admit his world, there was something happening constantly. It was very difficult to actually choose the parts that weren't as much about story and just about kind of showing his lifestyle, because like every moment I can't believe this is happening in front of my camera. He would say to me at the end of days, like almost every single day, he would say to me, I totally forgot your camera was here. And we're sitting in a room where we're, 2 feet from each other, but it was spectacular and grueling at the same time.
That says a lot about kind of your style of work. These projects, for me, what I love most about them is they impact and change my life. I mean, what would you say has been the biggest change to your life from this project?
I would say it's a sensitivity for drug addicts and street people, like a different sensitivity. I've always been considerate of other human beings, but I'm still not going to give someone begging for money, but I'm not going to be maybe the same angry at them. How dare you be out here and asking for money? It's hard. It's a very tricky, but definitely just an acceptance more of that culture that I just didn't have any idea about at all.
I'm hearing you say that, and I'm kind of thinking, like, how so? I mean, why?
Well, here's the best way I can actually relate it, and it goes back to my first films. My first film was also about the downtown east side here, and also about a homeless drug addict. And one of the very first scenes in the movie, because it blew me away when I saw this, is him basically making a date with another kind of homeless street person and getting a kiss and saying, "I'll see you later this evening, hon." And it blew my mind. I mean, of course they're having relationships, but you never see like this tender, like where would a normal person, quote unquote, ever see two homeless drug addicts interacting with each other in a very sweet, normal-ish way? I mean, it's just I'm able to look at them as more human than I did before, I guess is how I can say it. Because I think everyone kind of tries to make beggars and homeless drug addicts and street people not human or not as human.
Anything else? Any final thoughts? And do you want to kind of share about what you guys have coming up, or any new projects or anything like that?
Man, I worked on this film so hard. It's like I feel like my vacation can go on for quite a while before I need to start another project, just because I worked myself to the bone on this one. I edited for over a year on this. So,
friends and followers, thank you so much for listening in today. I count it a great honor to be able to pass on these artists' experiences to you. If you enjoy what you heard today, please share it, tweet it, pass it on. Let's build this community of artists and filmmakers. Next in our 24 and 12 series is Oscar Boyson, a New York-based artist that collected content from the world to bring a film on new cities to you.